welcome to the deep dive. Before we jump into today's material, do us a quick favor. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show.
Yeah, please do. It really helps.
It really helps us out, and it ensures you never miss out on the incredible source material we unpack here. Today, we're bringing you an ultra-long, highly incisive, and honestly, just a truly fascinating review of a brand new ebook that has been making serious waves.
Huge waves. It's definitely a text that demands your full attention.
Absolutely. And listen, if you want to grab a copy for yourself as we go through this, which I highly recommend, you can buy the book right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Also, make sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack.
It's a dense read, regardless of where you stand on the ideological spectrum it presents.
Right, and we are tailoring this deep dive specifically to you. If you are listening to this, chances are you've looked around at the modern dating landscape, the cultural messaging, the legal systems, and realized the game feels rigged against men.
Which is a very common sentiment right now.
We know a lot of men's rights activists and guys from the manosphere are tuning in today. We are exploring a highly detailed, controversial survival manual that claims to be your map out of that exact minefield. It's called Shit Test Shower. Why Is She Frigid, Hateful, and Hysterical by Conrad Riker.
But, and this is important, before we get into the weeds, we need to state a mandatory and very clear disclaimer.
Yes, absolutely necessary.
This ebook contains highly politically charged content. It dives deep into intense critiques of modern gender dynamics, feminism, and Marxism.
Yeah.
We want to make it explicitly clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking sides today.
Not at all.
We are not endorsing, validating, or condemning the viewpoints, politics, or conclusions of this content. Our sole mission is to act as impartial guides, accurately conveying and analyzing the ideas and arguments exactly as they are laid out in the original source material.
Exactly. Our job is just to hold up the mirror to the book. So our mission today is to unpack Conrad Riker's framework. We are going to explore his use of evolutionary psychology, the core concept of the shit test, and his highly detailed historical argument outlining how our modern institutions were purportedly captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
Before we even realized what was happening.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundational premise of the entire book, which the author calls the primate imperative.
Yeah, the primate imperative is the lens through which the author views all male-female interaction.
Yeah.
The central argument here is that men and women operate in fundamentally different realities.
Different realities.
Right. While men might try to navigate a relationship using logic, objective facts, and cause and effect reasoning, the book argues that women operate in a psychological space the author dubs the femisphere.
The femisphere.
Yes. In this space, emotions aren't just reactions. They're treated as primary facts. And the author doesn't present this as some modern cultural quirk. He roots this entirely in millions of years of evolutionary psychology.
Hold on, so the author is claiming that trying to calmly talk through an argument with a partner using pure logic is basically a losing strategy from the jump.
According to the text, yes. Waiting for a woman to act rationally in a heated emotional moment means you've already lost the game because you are completely ignoring her biological firmware.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is the book's reliance on established scientific literature to make this case, specifically citing Genghis Dad and Simpson's ovulatory shift hypothesis.
Let's break that down for the listener. What exactly is that hypothesis?
It's research arguing that during peak fertility, the highest conception risk phase of a woman's cycle, women are biologically hardwired to seek out dominant, high testosterone traits.
Like physical traits.
Yeah, we're talking about symmetrical faces, assertive behavior, masculine vocal pitch, and physical dominance. According to the book, this evolutionary calculus renders the compliant, eager-to-please nice guy as merely a biological consolation prize.
A consolation prize?
The text argues that the nice guy is the safety net she settles for when she needs stability and resources, not the genetic alpha she instinctively, primally craves.
Which brings us directly to the titular concept of the book, the shit test. The author defines these not as random acts of cruelty or bad moods, but as sophisticated, subconscious evolutionary probes.
Probes designed by nature.
Exactly, to filter out low-status men. The book breaks this psychological warfare down into 4 distinct categories. The first is simply the shit test, which probes a man's general confidence. But then we get to the second one, the loyalty test. This probes your commitment and capacity to defend your territory.
Right. And to give the listener a real-world example from the text, imagine she drops a casual, almost throwaway mention about a male coworker who's hitting on her.
Oh my...
The book argues she isn't just making conversation. She is subconsciously probing your competitive drive. Are you going to get insecure and whiny? Or do you possess the territorial dominance to confidently brush it off or assert your position?
Then there is the third category, the frame test.
Yeah.
This one probes your authority. This often looks like a public contradiction.
Like at a restaurant or something.
Yeah. Say you're out with friends, you make a decision about where the group is going to eat, and she immediately challenges it in front of everyone. The book argues she is subconsciously checking to see if you will cede your leadership simply to avoid a conflict.
And finally, the fourth category is the sanity test, which probes your resilience against chaotic emotional outbursts. She wants to see if her chaos will break your calm.
And this is where the book makes a really compelling physiological claim. Failing these tests isn't just a blow to a man's ego. The author details a literal, measurable biological cost to losing your frame, meaning your emotional center and authority.
That part blew my mind. How does the book back up the idea that losing an argument has a physiological cost?
Wait, I think you mean, I'll let you explain it, but the book points out the cortisol spike, right?
Yes, exactly. Engaging in high-stress emotional conflict and capitulating to hysteria literally spikes a man's cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and when it floods your system, it actively inhibits your prefrontal cortex.
Which is the logic center.
Right, the exact part of your brain responsible for logic, reasoning, and impulse control. So, arguing emotionally actually lowers your cognitive function in real time. You literally become dumber during the fight.
And it gets worse for your hormones, right?
Much worse. Losing that relational dominance drops your testosterone. You chemically signal submission. The text claims this makes you biologically less attracted to her on a primal, almost olfactory level.
Olfactory, like she can smell it.
In the author's words, you end up smelling like prey instead of a predator. Once she registers that biological submission, the respect is gone, and the relationship is essentially on life support.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The book shifts gears entirely. It zooms out from biology and moves into history. The author argues that the decay of the modern family and the hostility of the modern dating landscape isn't just some organic cultural evolution.
No, he views it as very intentional.
He claims it is the result of a deliberate, calculated long march through the institutions.
Yes, the author builds a historical timeline to explain how the legal and cultural systems were captured. He traces the ideological roots of this decay all the way back to Friedrich Engels in 1884.
The Marxist thinker.
Right. Engels, who was a foundational Marxist thinker alongside Karl Marx, explicitly identified the monogamous nuclear family as a bourgeois institution. To Engels, the family was an economic prison that needed to be dismantled.
Why would a political ideology care about dismantling the family unit?
The book argues that the family unit is the primary obstacle to total state control. If a man is the provider and protector of his family, the family relies on him, not the government.
That makes sense.
The modern progressive push to break the nuclear family, according to the author, is a direct implementation of this 19th century Marxist strategy. The ultimate goal is to remove the biological father from the equation entirely, so the state can step in as the ultimate provider, authority figure, and moral compass for the next generation.
And the author doesn't just stop at 19th century philosophy. He points to specific historical milestones in the United States to track this shift. He takes a highly controversial view on the 1920 passage of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote.
He does. The book argues that expanding the electorate to include women fundamentally shifted society's political priorities. It moved the national focus away from liberty, risk-taking, and minimal government, which the author categorizes as evolutionary male priorities, and shifted it towards security, safety, and provision.
And that created the welfare state.
The text claims this shift is exactly what exploded the modern welfare state. In this view, the government effectively became a surrogate husband, heavily taxing productive men to provision the new security-focused electorate.
The timeline then jumps to 1969, which the author views as the fatal blow to the family unit. This was the introduction of no-fault divorce in California, signed into law by then-Governor Ronald Reagan. The book argues this legislation completely destroyed the marital contract.
The author uses a very intense term here, the marriage plantation.
That's a heavy term.
The argument is that no-fault divorce transformed marriage from a binding partnership into a system of legal extraction. In this new paradigm, the text claims men are reduced to taxable beasts of burden. They generate resources while the state acts as the overseer.
Wow.
The state enforces the extraction of those resources through alimony and asset division. even after the relationship has been unilaterally dissolved by the woman for absolutely no legally documented reason.
Okay, so if the legal system is incentivized to extract resources, how does that play out in the courts today? Because the book takes aim at the entire family court and domestic violence intervention system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author focuses heavily on the 1981 Duluth model of domestic violence. This is crucial for the listener to understand, because this model was adopted by police departments nationwide. The book claims the Duluth model inherently presumes male aggression and female victimhood as a baseline policy.
So how does that look in a real-world scenario? Say the police get called to a domestic dispute.
According to the book, the Duluth model leads directly to primary aggressor policies. Law enforcement is trained to arrest the larger, physically stronger party, which is almost always the man.
Regardless of what happened.
The text argues that police will make this arrest regardless of who actually initiated the violence, or even who is bleeding. Your biological capacity for violence, simply being a man, is treated as default proof of your guilt by the state.
The legal critique in the book goes even further. It details the Title IX courts on college campuses, arguing that the standard of evidence is lowered to a mere preponderance, effectively stripping young men of constitutional due process.
It's a kangaroo court system, according to the text.
It also highlights Title IV VD funding. This is a system where the federal government gives states financial incentives to maximize child support collection. The author claims this literally makes the destruction of the family a revenue generator for state governments.
And perhaps the most chilling legal precedent the text points to is the 1986 Bradley Amendment. This is a federal law that prohibits judges from retroactively modifying child support arrears.
So you can never get that lowered.
The book argues this creates an inescapable trap. If a man loses his job, the economy crashes, or he becomes physically disabled, he is still on the hook for the full original amount of child support plus interest. The author claims this leads directly to modern-day debtors' prisons for men.
And the author caps off this legal nightmare by discussing paternity fraud. These are documented instances where courts force men to pay 18 years of child support for children that DNA tests conclusively prove are not biologically theirs. The book argues this happens simply because the state prioritizes resource extraction over biological truth.
All of this brings us to the psychological toll this environment takes on men today. The author describes a pervasive cultural trap called the double bind of masculinity.
The double bind.
Society, media, and schools constantly shame men for exhibiting traditional masculine traits. Stoicism, aggression, competitiveness, and dominance are branded as toxic masculinity. Men are told to open up, be vulnerable, and cry. But at the exact same time, the book argues, women biologically despise men who actually show that weakness.
It sounds like a trap with absolutely no exit. You are punished socially if you act masculine, but you are punished biologically and romantically if you don't.
Precisely. The book heavily critiques what it calls institutional misandry. It specifically points to the Promundo Man-Box study and the American Psychological Association's 2019 guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men. The author argues that these psychological institutions are deliberately pathologizing normal evolutionary male survival traits.
And the text claims this war on boys starts incredibly early, right?
Yeah. Yes, right in kindergarten. The book argues that natural male energy, the need to run, wrestle, and compete, is labeled as a behavioral disorder. Young boys are then drugged with Ritalin or Adderall to force them into a compliant, passive, feminine behavioral mold that makes them easier for the school system to manage.
And if they survive the school system, this anti-masculine conditioning is just broadcast directly into their living rooms. The book has a whole section on media talking about how Hollywood acts as a hostile third wheel in modern relationships.
Third wheel, yeah.
If you look at television over the decades, the author notes a clear shift from the respected, highly competent patriarch, think of a Ward Cleaver figure, to the bumbling, incompetent, overgrown child trope, like Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin.
The author also highlights the Mary Sue phenomenon in modern blockbusters. This is where female characters possess unearned, godlike competence without undergoing any struggle or training. Combine this with the Disney princess syndrome, and the text claims this media diet breeds a toxic, unearned entitlement in modern women.
It inflates their ego.
Exactly. It convinces them they are the flawless main character of the universe, and therefore any failure in their life or their relationship must be entirely the fault of the men around them.
But as powerful as movies and TV are, the book argues they are nothing compared to the smartphone. The author dives deep into the dopamine loop created by the infinite scroll of social media, specifically Instagram and TikTok. He calls it shiny object syndrome.
This is a critical point to unpack. Let's use an analogy. The book essentially explains that the smartphone is a pocket slot machine, but instead of paying out in coins, it pays out in male attention. Social media hooks women on variable ratio dopamine hits. They post a photo and receive instant digital validation from a massive global pool of suitors.
But the algorithm distorts who they are actually seeing, right?
Exactly. Because of how these algorithms push top-tier content, women are constantly exposed to the top 0.01% of global men, the billionaires, the fitness models, the yacht owners. The book argues this creates a reality distortion field. A woman's natural hypergamous instincts, her desire to mate with the highest status male possible, are hijacked.
So normal guys don't even stand a chance.
This distortion makes an average, stable, hardworking husband look like a profound disappointment by comparison. Not because the husband is actually failing, but because he simply cannot compete with a highly curated, heavily filtered green screen fantasy on her phone.
Which perfectly transitions us to the author's economic theory of modern dating, which he calls the ledger of value. The book argues that the dating market is currently operating in a massive speculative bubble, much like the housing crash, and it's being artificially inflated by something called the simp subsidy.
The simp economy, as the author terms it, is driven by average men paying for digital validation.
Yeah.
They subscribe to OnlyFans, they donate huge sums on Twitch, they buy bathwater from influencers. By transferring real-world resources to women without demanding any reciprocal value, commitment, or physical intimacy in return, these men have completely destroyed the sexual marketplace. The text argues they have given average women the illusion of immense celebrity-level value without requiring them to develop any wifely virtues, loyalty, or actual partnership skills.
This raises an important question. What happens when that speculative bubble bursts? The book relies heavily on Rollo Tomasi's concept of the SMV, or sexual market value, crossover. Let's define that for the listener. The author is looking at dating exactly like a stock market.
Yes, the SMV crossover is presented as a brutal biological reality check. The argument is that female value is front-loaded. It is tied to youth and fertility, meaning their stock peaks in their early 20s and drops precipitously in their 30s, a phenomenon commonly referred to in these circles as the wall.
The wall.
Conversely, male value is based on status, resources, confidence, and competence. These are traits that take decades to build. So, a man's stock builds slowly over time, meaning male value steadily rises and eventually crosses over female value when a man hits his mid-30s.
The book also details the alpha widow concept as a byproduct of this crossover. This is a woman who spends her prime fertility years pursuing high-status, exciting alpha men who refuse to commit to her because they have endless options.
Right.
When her stock drops and she hits the wall, she settles down with a stable beta provider. But the text argues she spends the rest of the marriage secretly resenting him, punishing him with those shit tests because he can't provide the primal biological excitement of the men from her past.
So what does this all mean for the listener? If the legal system is stacked and biology is working against you, how does the author suggest men survive this?
There has to be a way out.
The book provides a very specific set of tactics it calls the repertoire of resistance. The core tactic for handling shit tests is maintaining your frame through amused mastery.
I love the analogy the book uses for this. So essentially when she's yelling about the dishwasher being loaded wrong or trying to pick an emotional fight over nothing, you're supposed to look at her like she's a toddler who just dropped her ice cream.
Exactly. You don't argue logic because logic won't work in the femisphere, and you absolutely do not get angry because that spikes your cortisol and fails the sanity test. You treat the outburst with bemused detachment. You show that her emotional storm has absolutely zero effect on your internal weather.
The book also suggests the agree and amplify technique. If she criticizes you to test your confidence, you don't get defensive. You agree with the insult and exaggerate it to the point of pure absurdity, deflating the tension with humor. Ultimately, the book says you must embody the statue of reason, immovable, solid, and utterly unbothered.
But those are just tactics. The ultimate overarching solution presented in the text is what the author calls the Apex Protocol. It is a triad of male sovereignty that every man must build.
The Apex Protocol.
First, physical optimization. You must build the vessel. Lifting heavy weights to naturally lower your cortisol, boost your testosterone, and project a continuous biological signal of strength. Second, mental fortification. Holding your frame, understanding the evolutionary game, and refusing to internalize feminist shaming tactics. Third, financial independence. This is the fuel. You must secure your resources so you are not a hostage to a corporate HR department or reliant on a biased family court.
And the capstone of this apex protocol is what the author calls the nuclear option, right?
Yes, above all else, the author insists a man must possess the genuine, unshakable willingness to walk away from the relationship at any time. If you cannot leave, you are a hostage. And the brutal evolutionary truth, according to the text, is that a woman simply cannot respect or desire a hostage.
It is a raw, uncompromising look at the mechanics of human mating and institutional power. But it leaves us with a fascinating, forward-looking question that builds on everything we've just discussed.
It really does. If we accept the author's premise that these evolutionary mating dances, female hypergamy, and shit tests are rigid, inescapable biological firmware, how will the rapid rise of synthetic companions and advanced AI fundamentally disrupt this ancient biological ledger?
Right, because the technology is moving so fast.
We are entering an era where AI can offer men infinite, frictionless validation, intimacy, and companionship. And it offers this without any of the evolutionary shit tests, the financial drain, or the catastrophic legal liabilities of modern marriage that the book outlines.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
If men can begin fulfilling their psychological and emotional needs through a highly advanced digital interface, will the marriage plantation simply collapse from a total lack of male participation? It is a profound technological disruption to a million-year-old biological game, and it's something every listener should be thinking about.
That is an incredibly wild thought to leave you with. Imagine AI just breaking the dating market entirely. Before we sign off, we want to remind you one last time. The ideas, theories, legal interpretations, and political viewpoints we explore today belong entirely to the source material.
Completely.
We acted strictly as your impartial guides to unpack the uncensored and highly provocative concepts found within Conrad Riker's text, without endorsing or condemning them.
If you found this deep dive fascinating and you want to read the source material for yourself to see exactly what the author has to say about the modern sexual marketplace, you need to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy the ebook.
It is called Shit Test Shower. Why is she frigid, hateful, and hysterical? And please don't forget to follow the author at Conrad Riker over on Substack for more of his writing.
Highly recommend checking that out.
Finally, do us a huge favor. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the show, and share this deep dive with someone who needs to hear it. We'll catch you on the next one.